LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to the September 9th edition of LiberalViewer Monday Media Mixup. Thanks for joining me and Cheech the cat here. We'll be using the 11 best, most newsworthy clips I've picked out from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media. Tried to do the air quotes, so-called corporate media here in the United States, which would be really educational, informative, fair use media criticism and political commentary show for you all today. As you can see from the title of the video, this is my big pre-debate show where tomorrow is the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, their first and possibly only debate. And a lot of people on the left, the strategic thing to do is to set the expectations low for Kamala Harris and high. Donald Trump, this is his 7th general election debate. He's a seasoned debater. She's never had a presidential debate. She's only had one vice presidential general election debate. And she hasn't debated in a long time. And there are all sorts of ways you can set the expectations low for Kamala Harris and high for Donald Trump. But honestly, my real question, having watched a lot of his speeches lately, is can Trump debate 90 minutes with no embarrassing lapses? And I mean, almost to the level of what got Joe Biden to drop out, his whole meandering answer about, that ended with, we beat Medicare, when he was really trying to say they finally got to negotiate pharmaceutical prices for Medicare, and that debate answer that was meandering. Actually, after the debate, I showed the whole thing, and I talked about how some of it made sense, but it was enough to show a lapse on the part of Joe Biden. Well, Donald Trump makes those kind of lapses a lot, and sort of for my political comedy here, what I'm going to start with is when he was talking to the Economic Club of New York a few days ago, middle of last week. Was it Wednesday? I think it was Wednesday, maybe Thursday. And he gave his whole speech about his economic plan, and then at the end he gets this question about childcare. And his answer to this question about childcare is, this would count in the debate as far as I'm concerned as an embarrassing lapse, because there's very little content to the answer, and he goes back to his main talking point on the economy, which is tariffs, which is also a terrible idea. I talked about this a few weeks ago when I did the political comedy as to whether a tariff is a tax or not. And I'm going to show you several different ways that people approached Trump's answer, or several different Republicans try to explain it. I'll show you Governor Doug Burgum, Nikki Haley. Liz Cheney is going to say something really important about tariffs that no one else is really talking about. And anyway, those will be the newsmaker clips, and that'll come after the news summaries. But first, let me show you this 3-minute question and answer from the end of Trump's speech at the Economic Club of New York. I put a link down under sources in the video description where you can see the entire speech on the Times and Times of London YouTube channel for some reason. And the source of all the rest of the videos are down there, as well as short summaries of all 11 clips are all down under media mentioned in the video description. But I will talk about this, what counts as an embarrassing lapse as far as I'm concerned, from the Economic Club of New York after we watch it together over here.
President Trump, you talked about how the increase in the price of food, gas, and rent is hurting families. But the real cost that's breaking families' backs and preventing women from participating in the workforce is childcare. Childcare is now more expensive than rent for working families and is costing the economy more than $122 billion a year, making it one of the most urgent economic issues that is facing our country. In fact, the cost of childcare is outpacing the cost of inflation, with the majority of American families of young children spending more than 20% of their income on childcare. One thing that Democrats and Republicans have in common is that both parties talk a lot about what they're going to do to address the childcare crisis, but neither party has delivered meaningful change. If you win in November, can you commit to prioritizing legislation to make childcare affordable? And if so, what specific piece of legislation will you advance?
Well, I would do that, and we're sitting down. You know, I was we had Senator Marco Rubio, and my daughter Ivanka was so impactful on that issue. It's a very important issue. But I think when you talk about the kind of numbers that I'm talking about, that, because look, childcare is childcare. There's something, you have to have it. In this country, you have to have it. But when you talk about those numbers compared to the kind of numbers that I'm talking about by taxing foreign nations at levels that they're not used to, but they'll get used to it very quickly. And it's not going to stop them from doing business with us, but they'll have a very substantial tax when they send product into our country. Those numbers are so much bigger than any numbers that we're talking about, including childcare, that it's going to take care. We're going to have, I look forward to having no deficits within a fairly short period of time, coupled with the reductions that I told you about on waste and fraud and all of the other things that are going on in our country. Because I have to stay with childcare. I want to stay with childcare, but those numbers are small relative to the kind of economic numbers that I'm talking about, including growth, but growth also headed up by what the plan is that I just told you about. We're going to be taking in trillions of dollars, and as much as childcare is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive compared to the kind of numbers we'll be taking in. We're going to make this into an incredible country that can afford to take care of its people, and then we'll worry about the rest of the world. Let's help other people. But we're going to take care of our country first. This is about America first. It's about make America great again. We have to do it because right now we're a failing nation. So we'll take care of it. Thank you. Very good question. Thank you. Thank you, Bob.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trump.
Very good question. Not a very good answer, though. Why are they applauding? That doesn't completely make sense to me. But that was, they accuse Kamala Harris of giving answers that are word salad. I heard that over and over again on Fox News. That could be anything. That's got to be word salad. And it's not even really a good answer to the question of childcare. Sorry, I have to stop Cheech here from biting my laptop. Cheech is back. But the other thing underlying that is he has this whole tariff plan where he's going to put 10 to 20% tariffs on all imported goods. And he says that's not going to cost Americans anything. It's taxes on foreign nations, which is totally bogus. Everybody knows that the consumer pays the price for those tariffs. And so that would increase 10 to 20%. If you're going to do a 10 to 20% tariff, would increase the cost of everything imported, all that imported stuff at Walmart, all the cheap stuff from China, all the clothing, all the pharmaceuticals, all the cars, all the, everything that is imported would go up and would cost more to the American consumer, the amount he wants to raise these tariffs. It's really bad for the economy. So that's other than, in addition to the fact that he didn't answer the question about childcare, he also was proposing really bad policy. And I actually think I finally figured out why he is so hot for tariffs. And it comes out of Liz Cheney's answer, where she talks about the tariff answer. That's clip 10. I'm going to show you three different Republicans and how also the Fox News panel touched briefly on this childcare and tariff question. And then I'll show you John Fetterman at the end talking more generally about the debate. But before I get to those 5 newsmaker clips, I do have the 5 news summaries I want to show you in order from longest to shortest. The longest one is from NBC News Meet the Press, because I'm going to include Steve Kornacki going over the polls. And it's really long. Kristen Welker starts off with, pretty much the same stuff you see in the other one. 2 days to the debate. She talks briefly about that Georgia school shooting and how that's possibly going to be an issue in the debate. Talks about Liz and Dick Cheney endorsing Kamala Harris. And then they go over to Steve Kornacki talking about the polls for like 4 straight minutes, just to tell you it's still tied, which seems like way too much in depth, but for what has been the same news pretty much since Kamala Harris became the Democratic nominee, that they're all tied within the margin of error. But I will talk about those issues a little more with you after we watch that longest NBC News Meet the Press news summary. Kristen Welker, Steve Kornacki, over here.
Good Sunday morning. We are just 2 days away from one of the most pivotal moments of this election so far. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump will face off for their first debate in Philadelphia Tuesday night, just 8 weeks before Election Day.
We're run by stupid people. Stupid people. And we found that out at the debate with Joe. How did that work out? And we're going to find it out again on Tuesday night.
What's the one thing you want to really get across to him?
Well, there's a lot, but look, it's time to turn the page on the divisiveness. It's time to bring our country together, chart a new way forward.
The vice president has been huddling with aides at a Pittsburgh hotel, according to multiple sources familiar with her debate preparations. The team is expected to hold several 90-minute dress rehearsals, complete with lecterns and television lighting. Former President Trump has held a handful of sessions so far with campaign allies, pointedly calling them policy time instead of debate prep. How will both candidates define their positions on critical issues from the economy to abortion, immigration, foreign policy, and guns? It comes against a tragic backdrop. The nation is reeling after the deadliest school shooting this year, this time in the small community of Winder, Georgia, where 2 students and 2 teachers were killed when a 14-year-old student opened fire, according to authorities. Now that student and his father have both been charged after his father gifted his son the AR-style rifle that police say was used in the attack.
It's just outrageous that every day in our country, in the United States of America, that parents have to send their children to school worried about whether or not their child will come home alive.
I don't like this. I don't like to admit this. I don't like that this is a fact of life. But if you are a psycho and you want to make headlines, you realize that our schools are soft targets. And we have got to bolster security at our schools.
Both candidates will undoubtedly be pressed on that issue Tuesday night. Among the other key questions, how will Harris differentiate herself from President Biden? How will she explain shifting some policy positions? Can former President Trump stay on message? And will he resort to personal attacks? Vice President Harris is getting new support from an unlikely source.
Dick Cheney, your father, a beloved figure among Democrats for many, many years. Or do you care to share with us who he might be voting for?
Dick Cheney will be voting for Kamala Harris.
In a statement, former Vice President Dick Cheney writing, quote, "In our nation's 248-year history, there has never been an individual who is a greater threat to our republic than Donald Trump." Mr. Trump fired back. Dick Cheney is an irrelevant rhino, along with his daughter, who lost by the largest margin in the history of congressional races. Harris, for her part, weighing in on Saturday.
People are exhausted about the division and the attempts to kind of divide us as Americans. And them stepping up to make this public statement, I think, is courageous, but also for people like the folks I was just talking with, it really reinforces for them that we love our country and we have more in common than what separates us.
For more on where the razor-tight race stands in the battleground states, I'm joined by national political correspondent Steve Kornacki. Steve, break it all down for us. 2 days until the debate. Where do things stand?
Yeah, Kristen, 2 days before this debate, this is what you're looking at in the 7 core battleground states. You are seeing razor-thin contests here. You see less than a point, 1 point. 7 battleground states here that we think are likely to decide the Electoral College, the road to 270. Now, take a closer look here, and there are a couple things we want to draw your attention to. First, you do notice there's one state here, Wisconsin, where the margin does seem larger than the others. Put a pin in that because we're going to get to that in 1 second. But the other aspect here, when you look at these close races, particularly in the Sun Belt states, it reflects how this race has changed a little bit since Kamala Harris replaced Joe Biden as the Democratic candidate. What we're going to show you here, this is the diversity of the electorates in these 7 core battleground states, white and non-white. And you can see nationally, this is what the electorate looks like. These 3 states, Nevada, North Carolina, and Georgia, you see the share of the electorate that's white is actually lower in these 3 states than it is nationally. The share of the electorate that is non-white is actually higher. One of the things that has happened since Kamala Harris replaced Joe Biden is that Biden had been struggling relative to how Democrats historically do with Hispanic voters, with black voters, with non-white voters. Harris has improved on Biden's standing with those voters. She's not at the levels that Democrats have typically run at in the past, but she's improved. And so when we just showed you those close margins in these states here, that's the source of Harris's improvement. These states are looking more promising for her than they were for Joe Biden. But again, she's not at the level Democrats typically get with non-white voters. That's something her campaign is looking at, trying to boost and trying to improve. The other end of it, though, is this. Look at the states here, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, with the highest shares of white voters. Specifically here, we're going to look at blue-collar white voters who don't have 4-year degrees. And again, you see the national average here, 35%. Look where Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania are in their electorates. The key here is, remember, we just showed you that poll that had Harris up by 5.5 on average, the average poll in Wisconsin. Well, Wisconsin has the highest share of non-college white voters. These are the voters the polls missed on in 2020, missed on in 2016. They undercounted, the polls did, Trump's support with blue-collar white voters. So when you see polls this fall, particularly in a state like Wisconsin, I think you put a little bit of an asterisk next to it because we saw big misses there before. And the question is, are we seeing misses there again? Is Trump perhaps being undercounted in those states again? But again, 2 days into this debate, Kristen, the big issues that you're likely to come up here, just take a look from a Wall Street Journal poll where the 2 candidates stand here in terms of the public's view. Harris with an advantage on abortion of 20 points. She's made this a centerpiece for a long time now. The economy, immigration, the Israel-Hamas war, these are all Trump advantages over Harris, although Harris doing a little bit better on some of these questions again than Biden had, but not where her campaign would like her to be, Kristen.
All underscoring how high stakes Tuesday night is. Steve Kornacki, thank you so much for joining us.
Got it.
Joining me now is Democratic...
And I don't have a clip of Raphael Warnock, even though he was on a couple of the shows. The only Democrat I'm going to show is Senator John Fetterman at the end of the Newsmaker clips. That'll be after Nikki Haley, Doug Burgum, and Liz Cheney. Oh, and after the Fox News panel briefly touches on the issue of childcare and tariffs or whatever. But that news summary, I mean, I pretty much pre-criticized it. It was actually only 3.5 minutes for Steve Kornacki, so it's half of the 7 minutes with Steve Kornacki telling us that it was tied, but there was a lot of detail and depth there. And Wisconsin was the only one that wasn't tied, but it actually should be tied because of the fact that the polls undercount. I hope blue-collar white voters. I guess that's better than undercounting white-collar blue voters. Are there blue? Well, blue voters would be Democratic voters, or not like the color blue, but the color white voters with blue collars, those are the ones, for some reason, they don't get counted in the polls. So Wisconsin's probably even closer. So it's actually completely tied. Even the one state where it's not tied, it's tied, is what Steve Kornacki spent 3.5 minutes explaining to us. That, I don't know, was that an over-explanation, especially of a snapshot in time? I am often critical of having polls be the leading news in the news summaries, but it's getting closer and closer to the election, so they're becoming more and more relevant. But the polls have not always been accurate for reasons that Steve Kornacki. So maybe it was important for Steve Kornacki to remind us that the polls undercount certain people, but now you never even know who they're undercounting because who even answers the phone anymore? Who takes those polls? I don't know, but it might be undercounting a lot of younger voters too. Who you never know who you're undercounting till you have the exit polls and of the people who actually voted. But anyway, I'm going to move on to the next news summary, or maybe it's a so-called news summary because it's the Fox News Sunday news summary. And as we all know, Fox News is a propaganda outlet for the Republican Party, which Roger Ailes actually created it to be, as you can see detailed in this book over here, The Loudest Voice in the Room by Gabriel Sherman. Or look at all the Fox News bias I've documented over the years. And I think you can even see it in this report. They have Shannon Bream start off with a few different breaking news stories. They talk about the Georgia shooting. They talk about people in Israel. I talked about this last week extensively, how Fox News almost never lets you see that the people in Israel are actually protesting against Netanyahu and the Israeli government, just like the people at the college campuses, which they call anti-Israel protests on the college campuses. Well, then why are there hundreds of thousands of Israelis out on the street also protesting the Israeli government? Because of Benjamin Netanyahu, the crime minister Benjamin Netanyahu, I talked about extensively in last week's live stream and talked about how he's not doing what's in the national interest because he's trying to stay out of jail. Sounds like a familiar theme for right-wing leaders all over the place, apparently. But so that's at the beginning, just in Shannon Bream's intro. They say, they're protesting in Israel because they want a hostage deal. Which doesn't really tell the whole story. And then they have Rich Edson talk about the Trump campaign in fairly positive terms. Alexis McAdams, meanwhile, says a bunch of negative things about Kamala Harris, how she has to prepare. And then they show a clip of Kamala Harris you already saw in the Meet the Press summary, where she went to this spice shop in Pennsylvania where she's prepping for the debate. But I've been seeing this for several days on Fox News. Apparently it's a partisan spice shop. In fact, Molly Hemingway later in the show, and I've seen her multiple times, Fox News contributor Molly Hemingway says they're hateful and bigoted against Republicans. Can you be bigoted against Republicans? I'm not even sure that's a form of bigotry. But anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after we watch the Fox News Sunday news summary, such as it is, together over here.
Hello from Fox News in Washington. Here's a look at some of your headlines. A manhunt underway this morning in southeastern Kentucky after several people were hurt in a shooting and a crash on I-75. The sheriff's office says 5 people were shot. All are in stable condition. 2 other people were injured in a vehicle crash during all the confusion. Authorities do not think the gunfire was sparked by road rage. The search for the shooter resumed at daybreak. Hundreds of thousands of protesters took to the streets in Tel Aviv this weekend, calling for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to reach an agreement with Hamas to release the rest of the Israeli hostages. And former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris are gearing up for the ABC presidential debate on Tuesday. In a moment, we'll bring in 2 senators to discuss the stakes, Texas Republican John Cornyn and Connecticut Democrat Chris Murphy. But first, we're going to give you some live team coverage of the campaign. Alexis McAdams live in Pittsburgh following the Harris team. But we begin with Rich Edson live in Hudson, Wisconsin with the Trump team. Hey, Rich.
Hi, Shannon. Former President Donald Trump's final campaign event before Tuesday's debate, at least it's on his schedule. It was a rally here in Wisconsin, part of the northern Midwest blue wall that Democrats will likely have to defend if they want to maintain control of the White House. The president began the rally. His airplane flew a few hundred feet above the tarmac at Mosinee, Wisconsin, a conservative area about 90-minute drive west of Green Bay. In a speech lasting 100 minutes, the former president said he'd raise tariffs, secure the border, and have the war in Ukraine finished, done, and settled before Inauguration Day. He touted his VP pick, Senator J.D. Vance, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who suspended his campaign to endorse Trump. He called the current administration stupid and corrupt.
He is the worst president in history. She will be worse than him. She will be worse than him. And Trump is never wrong. I am never, ever wrong.
Trump's been outlining plans for the economy. On top of tariffs, he's pushing a new commission on government efficiency led by Elon Musk. He says he also wants to cut regulations and taxes. Democrats say his proposals are little more than a giveaway to the rich. Now, we asked the Trump campaign how the former president is preparing for Tuesday's debate. The campaign official responded, "What's debate prep?" Shannon?
Okay, we'll see how that pans out. Rich Edson reporting from Hudson, Wisconsin. Thank you. Joining us now, Alexis McAdams live in Pittsburgh, where the prep's a little bit different. Hello, Alexis.
That's right, Shannon. Trump might not be preparing and locked away in a room. He might be at rallies, but that's not the case here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where Kamala Harris, the vice president, has been in a hotel for a few days, really hunkering down and trying to prep to get ready to take on Donald Trump on the debate stage on Tuesday. She basically said it's like cramming for finals, right, where you can't wait to get out, and the getting out part was the best part. Watch.
Being at the spice store, I finally got out of the debate prep to look at these spices. Best part of debate prep so far.
But it was not just a visit to any spice store, Shannon. The vice president stopped at Penzies Spices in downtown Pittsburgh. Penzies is known for posting attacks about the GOP. The nationwide chain even offered a discount the other month to celebrate Trump's indictment, sending this out in an email saying re-indicted and it feels so good, and calling that spice justice. The Trump team firing back about that stop, saying, sorry, Kamala, scary spice is already taken. Despite being at that shop, Harris says America is ready to move on from political attacks.
Look, it's time to turn the page on the divisiveness. It's time to bring our country together, chart a new way forward.
Harris also thanking Vice President Dick Cheney and his daughter Liz Cheney for their endorsement.
I think that what they both, as leaders who are well respected, are making an important statement that it's okay, and if not important, to put country above party. And I'm honored to have their support.
Ahead of the debate, the Harris campaign says they're not happy with some of ABC's rules, including muted microphones, which it claims will benefit Donald Trump, saying this, quote, we understand that Donald Trump is at risk to skip the debate altogether if we don't do this preferred format. We don't want to jeopardize this debate. So for that reason, we accept this full set of rules, but they don't seem too happy about it. Back out here live in Pittsburgh, Shannon, Trump won the coin flip, so he'll get the final word at the debate. We'll have to see what happens. Shannon.
All right, Alexis McAdams from Pittsburgh, thank you so much. Joining us now, Texas Republican Senator John Cornyn.
And I don't have a clip of John Cornyn because Shannon Bream never asked him about tariffs or about Trump's childcare word salad nonsensical answer at the Economic Club of New York. You saw the whole partisan spice club, the re-indicted and it feels so good spice or whatever that was. I saw that over and over again on Fox News. It was kind of strange. The Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney endorsement of Kamala Harris was reported in the Alexis McAdams report on the Harris campaign, but not by Rich Edson in the Trump campaign part. And certainly not Trump's attacks on Liz Cheney, and he went on a huge series of rants on Truth Social over the weekend, including attacking people who oppose him and try to the election workers and the lawyers for the other side if they do anything that affects the election. He went on some terrible rants, and he said some kind of crazy stuff in that Wisconsin speech that Rich Edson didn't report on. And not only that, Rich Edson said that he proposed tariffs twice in his report, and that's kind of one of my themes here is about the tariffs. Trump specifically said in that speech that tariffs won't be paid by the American consumer. They're taxes on other nations, and that's totally bogus. That's not. He kind of said the same thing to the Economic Club of New York, but there's not an economist anywhere who thinks that the consumer doesn't pay for it. No, it hurts the other nation in that it makes their products more expensive, so it makes them harder for them to export. But then there's this whole other second level where they're usually retaliatory tariffs, so it makes it harder for us to export. That's what happened to the farmers during the Trump administration when he put all these tariffs on China. And that's something you'll see Margaret Brennan asked Doug Burgum about the soybean farmers, and I'll get to that when I get to the newsmaker clips. But I just want to point out Rich Edson's other bias there. The other, I pretty much pre-criticized the clip, but I found even more bias I forgot to mention by the time I got to the end. Now I'm going to go to the CBS News Face the Nation news summary, which instead of saying 2 days to the debate says 58 days till the election. It talks briefly about their CBS Battleground Tracker poll showing Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin at a tie, but doesn't go way off into the weeds like Steve Kornacki did, and then has a brief report from the campaign trail from their Pennsylvania campaign trail from Weijia Jiang, and I'll talk about that clip a little more after we watch it together over here.
Good morning and welcome to Face the Nation. We're starting a consequential week for both the Trump and Harris campaigns. With just 58 days until Election Day, both are preparing for their first debate. Will it change a race that remains neck and neck? We begin this morning with our new CBS Battleground Tracker poll of the three key states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, where the race is essentially even. Vice President Kamala Harris is up just 1 point in Michigan, tied with former President Trump in Pennsylvania, and up 2 points in Wisconsin. Senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang is in one of those states, Pennsylvania, and has the latest from the trail.
In Pittsburgh.
Can I have a hug? Yes, come here. Of course.
Vice President Harris took a break from intense debate preps to shop with voters.
Are you ready to face Donald Trump?
Yes, I am.
Harris was asked what she wants to get across during the debate.
It's time to turn the page on the divisiveness. It's time to bring our country together, chart a new way forward.
Rallying in Wisconsin, Trump had a different message.
We're run by stupid people. Stupid people. And we found that out at the debate with Joe. How did that work out? And we're going to find it out again on Tuesday night. Is anybody going to be watching?
Harris's aides say she plans to focus on policy, not personality. Our new poll shows Harris is competitive, in part because voters think she'll help the middle class, and she has an edge on making housing more affordable. But Trump is doing better with those who say the economy and inflation are major issues, especially holding favor among non-college and white voters. Sources familiar with Trump's debate prep say it's been informal, but he is going over specific policy proposals. A senior Harris campaign official says they believe Trump thrives under bright lights and on national TV, and they expect he will be ready. Margaret?
That's Weijia Jiang in Pittsburgh. We caught up with former Republican presidential candidate Nikki Haley on Friday. The former ambassador and South Carolina governor explained why she is supporting Trump. But you'll also hear her views on what she thinks he should be focused on in these last 2 months until Election Day. We began by asking if she'll campaign with him. You said...
And I will have a Nikki Haley clip talking about the child care response, although Margaret Brennan, I think, does a disservice to the voters by sort of what they call sanitizing Trump's craziness in his answer to the Economic Club of New York that I showed you at the beginning, and sort of phrasing it in, the robust tariffs are going to pay for child care. But I'll get to that after the news summaries. That was a fairly good, brief news summary, under 2.5 minutes. Now comes a CNN State of the Union news summary, Dana Bash, covering, the 2 days until the debate. And Trump and Harris are basically tied in the polls. It makes me a little sad playing the CNN clip because it just makes me think of this is CNN. And I just saw that James Earl Jones passed away. He was the great voice of Darth Vader, and he did the This is CNN. He had many great acting roles, and so just made me sad thinking of that. About to play the CNN State of the Union news summary over here.
I'm Dana Bash in Washington, where the State of our Union is getting ready for a critical debate. In 2 days, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump will take the stage in Philadelphia. And the new CNN poll of polls out this morning shows that their first and perhaps only presidential debate could not be more consequential.
The race between Harris and Trump is neck and neck with no clear leader. And while a new poll shows Harris outpacing Trump with women, younger people, and Black and Latino likely voters, Trump maintains strong support among men and older likely voters. Harris is already in Pennsylvania in formal debate prep, facing off against a stand-in playing Trump, while Trump's preparations are, as always, more informal. His advisors hope he will stay on message against Harris, who may try to needle him, but Harris also will look to answer voters' questions about her policies. Here with me now is someone who has debated Kamala Harris on stage, 2020 presidential candidate for the Democratic primary back then, Pete Buttigieg. Thank you so much.
And I don't have the Pete Buttigieg clip because I decided to take the John Fetterman clip from CNN's State of the Union. But that's the end of the news summaries. You can tell me which one you think did it best. And now I have the newsmaker clips that I have picked out and put in order to make my point about the original clip I showed you at the beginning, Trump's nonsensical word salad answer to how, what specific legislation is he going to support to help defray the cost of childcare. And he never gave any specific legislation, just said that his program of charging tariffs means we're going to make so much money that childcare is not going to mean much. But that is, or the cost of childcare won't mean much. You watched it. It was a nonsensical answer over on the Fox News Sunday panel, or they never brought this up with any of the newsmaker guests. That's why I don't have a Fox News Sunday clip from the senator from Texas or Senator Chris Murphy, I believe. Wasn't it Senator Chris Murphy, the other guest on Fox News Sunday? It was John Cornyn from Texas, and Chris Murphy from Connecticut were the two guests, but neither one got to talk about this. Instead, we got a brief mention from Juan Williams when the panel was talking about the two economic plans, and no one even talked about the tariff part that would be a huge, they briefly mention that Goldman Sachs says that the tariffs are going to be a drag on the economy. They don't really show the part of the Goldman Sachs analysis that says that Kamala Harris will actually cause growth in the economy. That part got cut out. But anyway, I'm going to talk about all of that a little more after you watch. This is the briefest mention of Trump's word salad on childcare and very little about the tariffs. This is all it got on Fox News Sunday in the entire program. Like 3/4 of the way through the program over in this clip.
They both rolled out economic plans this week. Reuters says this, citing a Goldman Sachs report. Under a Republican sweep, or even with a divided government led by Donald Trump, economic output would take a hit next year, mostly from increased tariffs on imports and tighter immigration policies, according to Goldman. They say he's not the one for your economy.
Yeah, I think the tariffs are something that I personally disagree with and have some policy issues with. I think he needs to point out, look, I have a vision. She has nothing on her website. She's giving you a sprinkling of proposals that have been, frankly, widely panned, including this idea of giving individual homeowners this $25K that would up housing prices and end up hurting people. I think that he can say, look, to the extent that he can connect the reality on the ground of what is happening right now and what people are feeling, people who are not Goldman Sachs, by the way, he can make that point about that division. He wins in the reality on the ground because he says, look what your life was like 4 years ago and look at it now. Compare the two. And I think that's what he has to drill down on.
Well, and that's what this Hill opinion piece this week gets to. It says, if Trump's policies were so terrible, why do so many people think they were better off during his presidency? Why were small business owners and consumers consistently more upbeat than they have been during the Biden-Harris years? Juan, how does she navigate that reality check that people get every day when they buy groceries?
Well, I think people have a certain nostalgia about the past. Joe Biden's numbers have gone way up since he decided.
Well, now that he's off the ticket.
That's what I'm saying. I think people, but the reality is, if you look at the numbers, the economy is better now than it was then. So you're dealing with this kind of memory sense of things.
Okay, but in what context? Just to give us a framework.
But the context is Goldman Sachs. They're no left-wing organization. They're saying the economy will be better under Kamala Harris.
They're also not mom buying groceries.
And also, I think. You also look at, I think this week there was 88 top executives who came out and said, we think that the economy will boost under Kamala Harris. And this week, Trump went before the New York Economic Club to give a speech, and it should have been, given the perception that he wants to say the economy was better, it should have been a knockout for him in front of all those rich men. Instead, he delivered word salad on a question about child care. And my sense is, look, the job numbers are good, the stock market is good, and right now the Federal Reserve is in a position where they're likely to lower interest rates.
Yes, please don't say raise.
I'm sorry, right. Lower interest rates, which will raise, I think, opportunities for Kamala Harris to say, we have a future that's better coming under my administration.
Well, Mary Catherine, you mentioned moms out buying groceries. You're a mom of four. That's certainly the circle that you often run in, is to hear from them about what they think.
Well, and my perspective is, if it's hurting us, I know it's hurting other people much, much more.
And as you might expect, that whole thing, you're a mom of four, that follow-up, somehow childcare, the question about childcare that you saw, the word, Juan Williams basically said a word salad about childcare, but that did not get picked up at all, that Trump had no real answer on the question of childcare, even though the follow-up was, well, you're a mom of four, you must talk to moms, and you said cost of groceries, but somehow they couldn't find it on the agenda to talk about childcare any more than that brief mention from Juan Williams. And you saw a brief mention about the tariffs, how they're going to slow the economy. Also, the deportation of immigrants is going to slow the economy. But Mary Katherine Hamm said, well, personally, I oppose tariffs and I have some problems with that. But they didn't really go into how it's going to be a huge tax on consumers. That was left out. So I showed you the only part of Fox News Sunday where they really addressed what Trump said at the Economic Club of New York about Trump's tariff policy. You saw Rich Edson in the news summary mention Trump was pro-tariff, but they never really analyzed it. And Mary Katherine Hamm didn't really analyze it, except the Goldman Sachs review that was quoted in Reuters saying it was going to slow the economy. And then Juan Williams pointed out that Kamala Harris, she's actually going to spur the economy. So why is it that Trump does better on handling the economy in polls? Because people haven't seen enough. Well, now they're going to see in the debate. It's probably going to be 60, 70 million live viewers of the debate, a huge audience, especially more people say they want to know more about Kamala Harris. So they're going to see her be able to explain her plans. And then Donald Trump, he's going to have at least one embarrassing lapse as bad as the Economic Club of New York thing I showed, and maybe worse. That's my prediction. And that's why I titled the video the way I did. Now, I do want to show a couple Republicans who had to answer a little bit more about Trump's crazy tariff plan to solve childcare problems. The first one I'm going to show you is the Nikki Haley interview from Margaret Brennan. Well, she first asked Margaret Brennan to respond to Trump's news conference about his sexual assault allegations where he went after the women, and she said, well, I didn't choose the candidates, Trump's the candidate, I want to talk about policy. And so then Margaret Brennan switches over to the policy here and asks, instead of talking about the crazy tariff plan to fix childcare, takes a really brief quote from what the whole clip I showed of what Trump said about tariff solving childcare, and just says, is Trump out of touch with economic statistics because he said childcare is relatively speaking not very expensive, when, from the whole context, he said it's not very expensive compared to the trillions of dollars they're going to be taking in tariffs or whatever, which is, there's only $3 trillion worth of foreign trade, so probably not going to be taking in trillions of dollars. But anyway, here's that question and answer from CBS News Face the Nation yesterday over here.
Let's talk about the policies then. One of the things that we know is hurting American families is the high cost of child care. The Federal Reserve said parents typically spend 50 to 70% as much per month on child care as they do on their housing payment, which is usually the largest monthly expense. Yet yesterday, Donald Trump said,
as much as child care is talked about as being expensive, it's relatively speaking not very expensive.
That sounds out of touch with the economic statistics?
I mean, childcare is very expensive. I know just even at the time that I had little kids, I worked just to pay for our childcare.
So what part of his policy do you like on that? Because you said on your policies that's what made you back in.
It is. And what I liked were the tax cuts that he had, that Kamala wants to remove. You know, when
she wants to also expand the child tax credit.
But that's the problem. When you get into child tax credits, you're picking winners and losers. You know what I would rather? I'd rather them just cut middle-class taxes across the board. Families need more money for housing, for childcare, for gas, for everything just to live their life. I'm looking at the facts. Under Harris, they raised taxes. Under Trump, they cut taxes.
So you don't like child care tax credits that Trump's proposing either?
I think we have to do something to help child care. What I would rather say is, rather than you saying we're going to give child care tax credits, help everybody. Cut middle class taxes. That's really what people need. Let them have more money, whether it's housing, whether it's rent, whether it's groceries, whether it's gas, whether it's child care. They need some relief. And so I don't oppose a child care tax credit, but I think cutting middle class taxes across the board is better.
So, I mean, at least Margaret Brennan asked Nikki Haley about it, but I think she kind of sanitized the craziness of what Trump said. I think, even though she showed the clip there, but I also don't think that she did that great a job expressing the craziness of the word salad, the disjointedness, and maybe over on NBC News's Meet the Press, Kristen Welker did a better job talking to Governor Doug Burgum in that she asked, can you help us understand this plan to pay for childcare by imposing robust tariffs? Like, at least making it seem kind of clear that what Trump said is kind of incomprehensible. And then she pushes back a little on the whole smart tariffs idea that Doug Burgum tries to gloss over the whole thing with, like pointing out the problem for soybean farmers in the last Trump administration. And I'll talk about that a little more after we watch that clip together over here.
Let's talk about his policies. I want to ask you about some of his comments this week at the New York Economic Club. He was asked what legislation he would support to deal with the high cost of childcare, to make it more affordable. He seemed to suggest he would pay for childcare by imposing robust tariffs. Is that your understanding? Can you help us understand what exactly was he proposing?
Well, I think it came near the end of his speech, and when he was talking about the opportunity we would have with energy abundance and energy dominance as a country, just like some states have, and just like some countries. You take a look at Norway, you take a look at some of the countries in the Middle East have built up huge sovereign wealth funds off of their energy. We have states in America, Alaska, Wyoming, Texas, New Mexico, North Dakota. Just those 5 states alone have built up over $330 billion of endowment funds because of the way they've managed energy in those states. So he was envisioning that if we have energy dominance, we sell energy to our friends and allies, we build up endowment funds, and then you can help pay for the cost of things that Americans need, just like we do in our state.
Well, and just to be clear, he was asked about how he would pay for childcare. He invoked tariffs. The person who asked him the question said his answer was insulting to parents because it sent the message that childcare expenses are no big deal. Was he specifically saying that tariffs would pay for childcare? And I guess a lot of people wonder, how did the two relate?
Well, I think that, first of all, dollars are fungible. And so if we've got dollars coming into the federal government that's coming from smart tariffs, where we're going for equal and fair trade, because President Trump really began his negotiations with other countries on Thursday. If you're going to tariff U.S. goods coming into your country, we're going to tariff yours. And so that's how we end up with free trade. But I think, again, when he was in office, he doubled the child tax credit, which is, again, was a big lift for families, and it helped lower child poverty in the United States. So he's shown that he knows and understands that, and he certainly understands how inflation is hurting every American today. And one of the things that has gone up in price is childcare. We know that from the work in our own state.
Well, Governor, let me ask you, because I hear you making the case for tariffs, but if you look at your state, soybean farmers took a real hit when Donald Trump imposed his tariffs during his administration. They lost 70% of their market. Do you believe, are you making the case, given that robust tariffs would be good for soybean farmers in your state? And what would you say to those who say they've been decimated?
Well, what would be good for soybean farmers in our state is that we actually add value to that product before we ship it overseas. Because when I took office 8 years ago, we had 0 processing plants for soybeans in our state. We've got two that have been completed, a third one that's under construction, which will take care of about 75% of our crop. And this fits right in with President Trump's policies, which is let's bring manufacturing and processing back to the United States, as opposed to us being like a colony where we just ship raw corn, raw soybeans to China. Add value here. That creates job. It creates additional economic value in our states and in our country.
All right, let me ask you about something that former President Trump posted on social media overnight. He seemed to be escalating his threats against political opponents.
And so, yeah, Kristen Welker changed topics there. She kept on, and I don't know, probably the right amount. Not so much about the real harm of tariffs. Talked about the problem to soybean farmers, but let Doug Burgum get away with deflections, smart tariffs. Well, we need to add value. We need to, instead of sending our soybeans to China to be processed, we need to make our soy sauce here, or I don't know, but I don't know exactly what soy and what processing of soy he's talking about, but it doesn't really give you the real picture of how bad tariffs are economically. I mean, if you believe in capitalism, which I know a lot of people don't believe in capitalism, at least not straight capitalism much anymore, but that goes all the way back to Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations, that at least in the abstract, free trade means that every nation, they do the stuff, they make the products, they grow and mine and manufacture the things that they can do best at the cheapest price, and then everybody trades with no friction, and so that's the lowest, everyone gets the best stuff for the lowest cost. That's how free trade is supposed to work. And then there's the opposite example from history, the Smoot-Hawley tariffs and you're about to see Liz Cheney go all the way back to Smoot-Hawley. I was thinking, is this so stereotypical that I think it was one of the things being lectured on in Ferris Bueller's Day Off? Am I misremembering that? Did the history teacher talk about the Smoot-Hawley tariffs? Maybe not. Maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe I'm thinking of Freaks and Geeks. I think it might have been an episode of Freaks and Geeks, but now I'm going off on a big tangent. Liz Cheney answering a question of a really softball question from Jonathan Karl on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. I think the question is something like, did Kamala Harris's more moderate face at the Democratic convention make it easier for you to endorse her? Fairly, softball, anodyne question, whatever. And Liz Cheney, in her answer, after going through a bunch of stuff, she hits Trump hard on the tariffs. And I guess because it's a classic conservative position to be for free trade. Democrats were more traditionally one with Doug Burgum's so-called smart tariffs or fair trade, or because they wanted to protect some workers, some industries. They were more pro-worker than Republicans. Now, sometimes the things seem to have shifted and Republicans have become more populist, but Liz Cheney is your classic Republican, and she's good at giving you the Republican line. I believe, like I said, we go all the way back to Smoot-Hawley tariffs and the Great Depression. And then she says something that I think may be the key as to why Trump talks about tariffs all the time. It's one of his main talking points. Why does Trump love tariffs so much? And I think the answer is within Liz Cheney's answer to Jonathan Karl that I'll talk about a little more after we watch it together over here.
You've made it abundantly clear that you have had policy disagreements with Harris. You still have policy disagreements with Harris. But she has moderated her positions on a whole range of issues from where she was just a few years ago. Did those moderations and the efforts to present kind of a moderate face at the Democratic convention, did that make the decision to endorse her easier?
I have never viewed this as a policy election.
Right.
But I think that it's a very important point. If you look at Vice President Harris's speech, for example, at the Democratic Convention, it is a speech that Ronald Reagan could have given. It's a speech that George Bush could have given. It's very much an embrace and an understanding of the exceptional nature of this great nation, a love of America, a recognition that America is a special place, a recognition that we all have to work together to ensure that. And you contrast that to ensure that we maintain it. You contrast that with what we hear from Donald Trump, again, on a daily basis, that America is a failing nation, that America is a laughing stock. The trash talking of the United States of America very much is part of the message that Donald Trump is pushing. And so at the end of the day, I think it's important for people to recognize he's not a conservative. The policies that we're seeing him put forward, including, again, on an almost daily basis, this notion of embracing global tariffs, that he's going to impose 100%, 200% tariffs. That is fundamentally an anti-conservative policy. It's also a policy that I point out to friends of mine who say, well, we're going to vote for him because of his economic conservatism, will choke off global trade, will likely lead us down the path that we've seen before, for example, in the 1930s, lead to, at that point, it was the Depression. The important thing for people to remember about something like the tariffs that he's promising, including, in addition to the fact that it's disastrous policy, he can do it alone. He does not need Congress, if he were to be reelected, to impose those massive tariffs that will, in fact, kill the American economy and the global economy.
I mean, in fact, he did some of that when he was in the White House.
And he's promising
to go to a new
more.
level.
Right.
So.
So, yeah, I guess Liz Cheney didn't actually say Smoot-Hawley, but she was talking about the tariffs in the 1930s that led to the Depression. The tariff wars created a lot of problems, and the Great Depression is one of the reasons. There are various reasons for the Great Depression, but that's a big one. And the other thing that she pointed out that I think may explain why Trump loves tariffs so much as a policy is that he can pretty much do it himself. Now, if you read your Constitution, I have my handy-dandy ACLU Constitution here, tariffs, setting tariffs, that's actually a power of Congress, not a power of the executive. But the thing is, Congress has passed several laws over the years that give the executive branch like unilateral authority to set tariffs for various reasons. There are like multiple different laws that could be used. One, here I put a link in the live chat to a congressional report on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. That's one of the main ones that Trump could use to set any tariffs he wants, but there are several other national security reasons and retaliatory tariffs. If you just say that China's doing something that's bad for trade, so we can do something. So there are various ways that the administration can invoke the power to set tariffs, just like Trump is proposing, and they're disastrous. But the reason I think Trump likes that so much is because it basically gives him absolute power over setting a price on about, like I was saying before, like $3 trillion worth of trade. And if there are $3 trillion changing hands and he gets to decide the price of what the tariff tax on those transactions is going to be, what are the opportunities there for like kickbacks, for like payoffs, for graft, for corruption? I think Trump is like somehow Jared Kushner all of a sudden is getting $1 billion, of Jared and Ivanka, or the kind of things that they accused the Biden family of but could never prove. And Ivanka got all those patents during the Trump administration. It's just another way where I think Trump sees that he can use his power over large monetary transactions to increase his own wealth. That's my theory on why he loves tariffs so much. You can Let me know what you think in the comments section about that. And I've shown you the 3 Republicans. The final clip I want to show you is Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania. I think I said in a previous live stream that he's one of my favorite senators, and some people thought that to mean that I agree with his policy on the Israeli conflict in Gaza, which if you watch my live stream last week, you know that's really not true. But it's not, when I said he's like one of my favorite senators, it's because he's like really different from what I've followed politics for many years, and there haven't been many senators like John Fetterman. Who have, he wears the hoodie and has like the regular guy kind of affect, and he gives off a real aura of like being overly honest, overly candid, too candid sometimes. And so while I was not adopting all of his policy views when I said nice things about John Fetterman, I like listening to some of the things he says, and his, I guess, maybe because of his difference, because like a breath of fresh air in the Senate, which is, of all the things, is definitely a musty old institution. Anyway, with that introduction, I'm going to show the final clip where John Fetterman talks about what Kamala Harris, they both must win Pennsylvania. Pretty much, Pennsylvania is almost, it's almost definitely going to decide the election. Whoever wins Pennsylvania is going to win the election almost certainly. I mean, there's some really unlikely scenarios where that's not true, but it's pretty much true. Especially for the Harris campaign, they need Pennsylvania. So this is an important answer. And John Fetterman also points out it's tied. It's going to be close. No matter what happens, it's going to be close. And it's a good clip to end on. And I will talk a little more before I give the bonus Cheech and Chong, the kittens clip that I do every week. But here's the last newsmaker clip I will talk about with you a little more after we watch it together over here.
Kamala Harris is already there this weekend preparing for her debate against Donald Trump. You greeted her on the tarmac in Pittsburgh. What do you think she needs to do to win over key voters in Pennsylvania?
Well, I mean, I really want to just point out that I haven't said anything different since back in 2016. Back then, as a surrogate for Secretary Clinton, after my campaign, and now in 24, it's going to be very close. It's going to be very close. And we have to do everything that we possibly can to make sure and have the conversations with all across Pennsylvania in all kinds of rooms that may be hopelessly red kinds of counties, but it's going to be the one on the margins. And I've always maintained that. And that's what happened in 2016, that Trump won. And then, of course, Joe Biden won by 80,000 votes. So I've been predicting this is going to be close regardless. And that's where we're at now. And that's why I'm committed to showing up all across Pennsylvania. And people understand it's all about the choice. And it's not about policies or who has more money or, talking about scandals or things kind of thing. People all have to ask themselves, what kinds of the next 4 years do we want? Do we want that kind of chaos and that kinds of absolute kinds of reckless and bizarre behavior from Trump? Or do we want 4 more years of getting us through a pandemic and standing with our allies like Ukraine or Israel through all of that? And by any metric, our economy is the world's, absolute world's envy on that. So I'm proud to stand with Joe Biden, and I'm absolutely proud to stand with Vice President Harris. And I also want to just say that it's going to be a straight up debate. She's going to do great, of course, but Donald Trump will be good too. I mean, we can all remember he wrecked all of the Republicans. He's a good debater. But at the end of the day, I don't believe this debate's going to be definitive because it's going to come down to this choice, and it's going to be close.
Senator, you have been saying nonstop a version of what you just said about going into the rural, redder areas of Pennsylvania. But my question is, when you go in, what do you say? How do you convince those voters? And Kamala Harris will be effectively going in on this debate stage. What does she need to do to change the dynamic and make it less of a neck and neck race for the voters that you're talking about that she needs in your home state?
Like I said, she has an amazing career, and she definitely is a new way forward. But if you liked some of the kinds of things that Trump, the way he speaks, the kinds of things that he's done, the kind of record that he had as a president, and that kind of division and that kinds of cruelty, and that it's like that's a stark choice, regardless where it was Biden or was Hillary Clinton as well. Pennsylvania is always going to be closed, and that's where we're at now. And it is a very, very stark choice. This isn't about nuance, and it's about who putting out the latest white papers and the kinds of obscure things. And that's why people, I think a majority of Pennsylvanians are going to decide, hey, I want 4 years of order and fairness and unity and a different way forward. And I don't think they want the kinds of dark days and chaos that Donald Trump provided for our nation.
I want
to. Dark days and chaos. Dark days and chaos. We won't go back. We won't go back. That's also one of the keys here is like who can show themselves as the agent of change, and they both have problems that way. Kamala Harris, she's the sitting vice president, and she has to differentiate herself from the current administration as an agent of change while still being a good partner and a cheerleader for what the administration has done. And Trump, his act is getting kind of old news. Some of the stuff he's been saying hasn't been true and for so long, and then he comes up with new lies. Everybody wanted to get rid of Roe. Everyone wanted to send it back to the states. Liberals, conservatives, everyone wanted it, and I'm the one who did it. Like, where does he come up with this stuff sometimes? But it'll be interesting to see how much fact-checking there is, and whether Trump ends up with one of his embarrassing lapses. And like I said, the standard I'm setting isn't quite as high as the embarrassing lapse that I showed after the last debate, the Trump-Biden debate, where Biden kind of like got off track and said, we beat Medicare at the end. That doesn't have to be quite that bad. I think it can be just as bad as what he did with his answer on childcare. Well, you got to have it. In a country like this, you got to have it. And he like goes off and meanders on tariffs. And there was one point in there, if you go back and watch the thing again, where I almost got the feeling he was wearing an earpiece and someone was saying, get back to childcare, get back to childcare. Because at one point he says, he's like meandering along on tariffs. Go back and watch the clip again. And he's like, get back to childcare, get back to childcare. But he's like, he says that like 2/3 of the way through his meandering. So maybe he did have an earpiece in. I don't know. But it was definitely an embarrassing lapse, and I think you can expect at least that level of embarrassing lapse from Trump at the debate, where he doesn't have anything to say, and so he like wings it. Like I said, I think on MSNBC they were calling it like an 8th grade book report where you didn't read the book or whatever. That's kind of what that answer sounded like. But anyway, you can let me know what you think is going to happen in the debate. It's going to, if you're a recorded show viewer, maybe you've already seen it, although most of the recorded show views will be during the day on Tuesday, based on past performance. But before I go, I did promise a bonus Cheech and Chong, the kittens clip, or I guess they're cats. They're over a year old now. I had this discussion at the end of the show last week because I think they keep growing for 18 months, so I'm not sure if they're cats or there's some like slightly diminutive, but I tend to call all cats kittens anyway. So it's the Cheech and Chong the kittens clip. This is I threw a little green spring toy into the toy tunnels. One cat is the fastest to get in there, but one actually comes out with the spring. Who is it going to be? Cheech Chong? We'll all find out. Well, I know the answer in the bonus Cheech and Chong the kittens clip over here. So Cheech got in the tunnels first, but Chong was the one who finally came out with the green spring. I know that's more Chong's favorite toy anyway, and I actually think Chong is kind of smarter than Cheech, at least when it comes to the kittens. I'm not talking about the real Cheech and Chong, but at least in our house, I'm pretty sure Chong. Well, because like Cheech can't open the shutters. He'll go up on the shutters after Chong figures out. Chong opens the shutters. Cheech can't do it. So that's another. I have lots of evidence that Chong is the smarter one. But anyway, that's the show. I'll be back next Monday and every Monday all the way through the inauguration next January. I'll keep doing these shows. We'll find out who wins in November and if it's the same person who's inaugurated in January, because you never know. You never know. It's been a wild series of events so far, and one of the biggest events is coming up tomorrow night, or depending on when you're watching this. Maybe I'll have a chance to make a video about it. See how the rest of the week goes. Otherwise, I'll be back next Monday, or maybe I'll have some other reason to make a video. Have to start making those shorter videos again, I think, as I'm finishing up this weekly live stream stuff. So that's kind of the plan. Some other video or next Monday, and until then, I guess I'll be seeing all of you around the internet.